wholeness comes from the inside out.
When we're living congruently with our values, there's happiness because there is that sense of wholeness.
Wholeness is when the way of your being matches the truth of your being.
In this episode, Juni of junibewell.com shares the real truths about the journey found within a cancer diagnosis. As a nutritionist and meditation teacher, she has a unique, practical way to look at your overall health and wellness. She has walked the walk, and it was great to share in her talk. Plus, we shared a little bit of girl talk about aging, weight issues, and building a relationship with our health. It was a great conversation.
I found my own lump. I was not someone who was particularly good about breast exams, but I am somebody that's pretty in tune, or I thought I was. And I just, I found my own lump. I was able to get in really fast because I was considered young for breast cancer. I was 41 at the time. And I had my mammogram like right after my 40th birthday. I've always been pretty good about just like doing the thing I'm supposed to do, but they didn't see anything, although it was probably there. The doctor was really like kind of, I'm not worried, but let's just send you for further tests. I do feel what you're talking about. It's probably just a cyst. And then I went to an ultrasound appointment. They were able to get me in, within a couple of days, which was nice. And then that just took forever. Like wow. I had fought with my partner at the time. I was, he really wanted to come to the appointment with me. I'm like, it's nothing. I don't even stress yourself out. And he was like, no, just let me come with you, please. So he did, which I'm so grateful for that. And, they were just taking a really, really long time. And I started to, it hit me because at one point my whole body just started to shake and I was like, something's wrong. And the doctor, just kind of turned to me so nonchalantly and he said, I believe that you have breast cancer and I want you to know that we'll be with every step of the way. And I was just like, what? And it was complete shock. And, and they were like, so we need you to go back out to the waiting room. We're going to do a biopsy right now. We found 2 masses and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, how can you think that I have breast cancer when you haven't done a biopsy? But I guess, in an ultrasound, they can really tell a lot. I mean, they can certainly rule out if it's a cyst for the most part. So, so they kind of like booted me out to the waiting room and I was just a mess. But I found out the whole time from finding my lump to like getting the call that verified everything was less than a week. But it was, I don't think anybody who's ever diagnosed ever forgets that moment. Right. It's just
feels like an eternity. I'm sure.
Yeah, it feels like an eternity for sure. And it just, like I literally can still feel like the cold of the countertop when I was getting the call from the doctor.
Wow.
Like on my elbows, like I can feel it in my body. Just those sensations that you were just talking about.
When you talk about still being able to feel the cold, and what that does, that is that's a traumatic moment. In those moments, I just want to pause for a second and do two things. One is before in that period of time when it was a lot of unknowns, what were the emotions that come up, or was there lack of emotion? Numb. Sometimes we get numb, right? Sometimes we get numb. What were those emotions that you experienced during that time of that? It kind of feels like a whiplash and all of that kind of thing, so that we can get a feel for that in ourselves. And
that's an interesting question. You mean like between when they said we found something, we think it's cancer, and when they told me?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's interesting. I honestly feel there for me, I was really working on wrapping my head around it, because when
Yeah.
I asked the doctor, like, well, what percent sure are you? And as you are probably gathering from this conversation so far, I'm a very logical person. So like he said 90%.
Mm,
And I remember telling that to my partner, because he was like, well, how can they know without the biopsy? I was like, that's what I said. But
right.
and I was like, but he said 90%. He was like, well, we still don't know. And I was like, 90% is pretty high. So
Right.
really for me, it was a matter of like, it wasn't numbing out.
Hmm.
It was really more of like, okay, how do I prepare for this?
Hmm.
And then really just kind of like coming, it was the first time for me, even though I was 41,
Hmm.
to really sort of like be face to face with my mortality, because there's all these questions at that time. I mean, I didn't know if they were going to say you're stage 4 or stage 1, or you're going to have chemotherapy or not. With breast cancer, that is one thing about it, that's because there's so much research, and because early detection is such a big thing, there is such a wide range of experiences with it. So, I only ended up having to have surgery, and then I was prescribed hormone blocking medication. So, I didn't have to do chemo, and I didn't have to do radiation,
Hmm.
but I did lose a breast. And there's a whole journey with it, but
Right.
like,
Right.
um yeah, so I think it was really just like being like facing my mortality, and trying to be prepared for whatever. But it was so scary. Like,
Hmm.
I'm feeling those sensations again. Like, I just feel like I was a little bit nauseous all the time.
Hmm.
um and and very scared.
What
Yeah.
were the thoughts and beliefs? Like, I think it would be, I imagine I am a very empathic person. So I imagine
Can
it would,
tell.
you would kind of ping pong between needing to wrap your head around what is, and this idea that we've got to be positive, and like, and even in your partner, he's like, well, we can't be sure, like there's this need to like stay
Mhm.
positive. And what was that like? What was that experience like with that kind of Russell, I would imagine?
Yeah, well, that is such a struggle, I think, with a lot of cancer survivors, because you're told you got to stay positive, or you're gonna,
Right.
like, you think you're gonna make it worse. So yeah, you're kind of going between this, like, trying to like really face what you're dealing with, but also trying to stay positive. I mean, it
Mhm.
depends on kind of what you're looking at. Breast cancer has one of the highest survival rates.
Mhm.
Things like, if it was pancreatic cancer, I probably would have been in like a different headspace. But
Right.
also, I mean, I don't have biological children. At the time, I was with, a long-term partner who had 2 children, and
Mhm.
they were with us at the time. He shared 50-50 custody. So it was like, how do I sort of acknowledge my own feelings without breaking down in front of the kids and scaring
Mhm.
them?
Mhm.
So there's that part.
Mhm.
There's the dealing with, like, I mean, I didn't, besides my mom, I didn't really tell anybody until I got like the final confirmation.
Mhm.
So there's a whole bunch that goes on there, and there is a struggle. Like, it's that fine dance that I think we have to do throughout our entire lives, of like,
Mhm.
how do you stay, and it sounds like you're kind of in that vein of like law of attraction, and I am too, of like, well, I don't want to bring more negativity into my life. I don't want to open down this negative pathway, but also, how do you feel the feelings too?
Right. I
So,
agree.
it was just sort of that on steroids, I think.
Mhm. Right.
But the same theme that you deal with every day,
Yeah.
of, yeah, just trying to
Yeah.
stay positive.
Yeah, like I really want to just take a moment and honor that extremes of those thoughts, beliefs,
Yeah.
and those emotions, and that numbness that maybe comes in, or even that desire to check out, maybe that's possible, that that's normal, that's normal for people. Also, I think sometimes we have, I'm touching on all these bodies, like this spiritual body, our meaning and connection. And sometimes things become, when you talked about, dealing with your mortality, our meanings change, and that can be a positive thing. And I think also just to be aware that sometimes disconnection happens. I know I have a good friend, and she went through cancer, and it was amazing how people disconnected. There was this disconnection. So I just wanted to address that a little bit and get your take on both of those areas. What was that like in that part of your life, that meaning and connections or disconnection or things like that? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have such great questions. And sorry, I'm like I said, I'm still recovering from COVID. So that I think I remember this thought, and as somebody who's already was a meditator and knew that I could fall back on that. And, I had a lot of tools in my toolbox in terms of like stress management, but in times like that, like I had to remind myself, sometimes you literally are just going from one breath to the next.
Right.
And that's all that you can do. Like it's never going to feel like you're really putting that weight down, like
Right.
ever in that for this period of time. And just trying to remember that and like surrender to that. That was so key for me. And I think because you want, especially if you are somebody who has a mindfulness practice or whatever, you're like, oh, I just want that relief. I just want to feel okay, even for a second. And recognizing like, it's probably going to be very fleeting, and you might never really reach that baseline that you're hoping for, but just to take it moment to moment, and remember that you are not your thoughts, and to try to live in the present. But, and then the disconnect thing, that's something I talk a lot about in the cancer journey. Is there will be relationships that will surprise you, because some people will come out of the woodworks that you have, you're like, had no idea we're going to show up for you. And then there are other people that you really expect to show up for you that don't. And I think there's a difficulty for a lot of people in that, because it can be very painful if somebody you think you're really close to doesn't show up for you the way that you're hoping that they do. But I also think that I tried to be very compassionate. I mean, there were definitely times that I felt slightly offended or whatever, but I would just remember, like, I don't know what's going on in their life.
Right.
They are a lot of people freeze. People freeze. They don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And I tried to be compassionate about that, but there were certainly relationships that fell away, and I just had to remember that, just like everything else, there's an ebb and a flow, and things, and just like what you were saying about what was it, just sort of like the direction and the priorities, you learn things, you learn what's really important to you. I think that can really be a gift. And I know for me, I just really turned that corner of I get to create my own life. I don't want to do things I don't want to do, or I feel like I should be doing. And so I made a lot of changes, but they were changes that happened over the course of like a year and a half. It wasn't something instantaneous, but it was huge. I changed my career. I got out of my perfectly happy relationship because I just knew it wasn't where I wanted to be. And so that's hard. It's not always a glaringly obvious thing. Like you're developing this relationship with that inner voice and that that intuition that sometimes doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, I had like a wonderful partner who was fantastic, and but I knew there was like this healing that I needed to do and other things that I'm like, this is not where I'm supposed to be right now. And, that was an extremely hard decision to make for me, but, I moved. I just,
Mhm.
but now, even though I don't think my life is perfect, I
Mm.
think my life is very purposeful. And even when I'm struggling, I feel quite fulfilled.
Mm.
And that, to me, I mean, that's another thing that they study with cancer. And it's not something that I want to make people feel guilty about, but living in with purpose,
Mhm.
feeling like you're being true to yourself can be very big in this cancer world.
Yes, and I love that word, purposeful and
Mhm.
fulfilled. To me, those are synonyms to that ease.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, it's not like you wake up and I just easily get money flowing into my, like
Yeah.
people think that's the ease, but I think it's more like it's just that purpose, like you say, and that, and we have vitality in our daily life. And although we have the rainbow of emotions, which are all correct, um, we easily feel all of those things,
Mhm.
that's the ease. And it's easy. And that's, so to me, that's kind of, once we get a disease, and cancer is one of those big, huge in our, um, this era we're at, that is the big disease that we see and that touches everybody's life. And so, I think it's important to learn from people that have been through that, more than just how do you make it never happen? How do you, this is a part of our society. We are all touched by this in any way. And it's really easy to go into this hierarchy of, well, I didn't have to have chemo, or I was
Mhm.
only stage 1. And if we can kind of push that aside for a minute and
Mhm.
really just come together and everybody bring the lessons that they've learned to the table of all of us, and that's what will make all of us whole, even those of us that haven't been touched by it within ourselves.
Mhm.
So I appreciate you teaching us and being able and willing to talk about it, because I think it's so important to talk about the bigger picture and to really let people kind of dive into that place for a minute, so that they can kind of think about themselves and what's going on in their life. Like you say, you had to make a decision about a relationship, and you said it was great, but you
Mhm.
knew that it wasn't for your highest good, or what was needing to happen. And we all, we all need to kind of look at ourselves and our relationships in that way, and you said you changed your career.
Mhm.
And so tell us about that. Tell us about that change.
Yeah. Yeah, well, okay, so the career change. Yeah, I had always been really passionate about wellness. Um and like, since I was a teenager, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's
Mhm.
thyroiditis when I was 17. And it was something, so I started to really get a little bit fascinated by food and
Mhm.
things like that. And all my friends were always like, why aren't you a nutritionist? Like, you're so, whatever. And yeah, I was working this job in the legal industry. I was making better money than I've ever made. I was more financially secure than I've ever been. And it was so nice having that. But I knew I wasn't living in my passion. I knew I was really, my job involved doing legal intake. So I had to talk to people a lot of the times about very painful
Mm.
episodes in their lives. And it was really taxing, because it wasn't like a therapist where I could, take a break between sessions and kind of reset. It was like I
Right.
had to, and I really could feel it in my body. So
Wow.
there's that blessing and the curse of being in touch
Mhm.
with yourself.
Yes.
And for a number of years it worked out great. But
Mhm.
then around year 5, I really was like, this is taking a toll on me. And I decided after the whole cancer thing it was that same whole sense of like, I just don't want to do things I don't want to do. Like I get to make this up as I go along. So what do I want? And I like, well, what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about nutrition. People do this. It's not like I'm, it's not like I'm trying to invent the next
Right.
mode of space travel. I'm just trying to like work in the wellness industry.
It's a real thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, not to say
Yeah.
that people should tell themselves they can't do that either, but it was like,
Right.
it's not literally not rocket science. So then the lockdown happened and I said, well, what a great time to go back to school. So I enrolled in a course. I mean, I was doing my full-time job and in school. And then after I finished the course, I worked my full-time job and started my practice and started building that. And, I kind of don't know how I did that, to be honest with you,
Right.
because but I was so passionate about it. It felt really effortless, to be following things. So, yeah, that was a transition I made. And, I think I don't regret it. I don't regret it at all. It's now I specialize in helping other breast cancer patients, and I do a lot with hormone balance because most breast cancer is hormonally driven. And that was one thing I just wanted to kind of go back to something you were saying before. I love that you brought up this. There is imposter syndrome with early stage cancers. I think for a lot of people, myself included, you feel like, oh, I didn't do chemo, therefore, yeah, it's all a journey and it all has a lesson to it. And I think for me, I really like to encourage people to try to invest in their health if possible before they have a health crisis. But the health crisis is often a very powerful intervention. And I know that there were things that I did as a younger person, namely, I mean, I've always been health conscious, but if I had been having a few drinks, I might like share a cigarette with somebody or whatever. And there were things that I would struggle with like that. I'd always feel a little bit drawn to that I knew weren't good for me. And it wasn't until the diagnosis of cancer that I was just like, oh, I can't, there are things I can't do. Like that's not good for me. It doesn't serve me. And it was weird because I never feel tempted by certain things anymore. And facing your mortality sometimes at a younger age than what's standard can be a real gift. But we really like to convince ourselves that we're, tomorrow,
Right.
I'll be better tomorrow. And the thing is, you just never know. And especially, I'm 45 now. Like my friends, I tell a lot of my friends are going through perimenopausal stuff. And it's like, you've got to, investing in yourself and, nourishing your adrenals, managing your stress, like start small if you need to, but like, we don't have time to wait. Like yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, it is.
No.
I will be 48 next month. And it's surprising to me how my body is telling me, okay, it's time to make some of these little changes, and yes. I'm even like craving different foods, in fact, my daughter, our teenage daughter, she'll say, the other day I made like this pasta salad and she's like, I thought I would like the tomatoes again, and I didn't like them, and I told her, I said, I didn't like them when I was your age either. I totally didn't. But now it's like, I'll crave those things. Like it's, if I'm really listening to my body, I'm really surprised at how it's moving me into this more, I would even just say a more mature palate that's healthy for my body. And I'm really grateful for that. Like, I'm really grateful for that. I wish I would have had those cravings a long time ago. But yeah, and it's been, it's I think this time in our lives, this is another tangent I could go on forever. I'm realizing this is a quiet, lonely time of life for women. There's not much said. It's kind of like pretend like that doesn't exist. Pretend like your hair is the same color. Pretend like your skin is the same elasticity. It's just, and I feel that tug of war even in myself, not wanting things to shift, not wanting them to change, and yet at the same time wanting to embrace and accept that I'm moving into a different part of my life, and that's I can either put the work into changing everything about myself or accepting. I think they're probably both difficult, but I would rather kind of accept, I mean, not that I'm against anything. Like, I still get my hair colored, I still get my hair colored, but, and we'll see.
No, I agree. And I love what you said. And I think it's so important, like the tomato example.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a huge mistake. Well, okay. A huge mistake. That sounds very judgmental.
Yeah.
I think it's very common for us to think, because our brains, or at least my brain, wants to check something off our to-do list. When you're like, oh yeah, right, I don't like tomatoes.
Right.
And then so you tell yourself you don't like tomatoes, but then our health is not static.
Right.
Like, it's just not static. So like, and also I have struggled a lot to come into surrender with the idea of like, hey, my health routine now looks very different than my health routine in my 20s. And I can't and don't want and don't need to do the same things because they get different results.
Right.
So like, I think being adaptable and surrendering is so important, but it's a struggle. We have a lot, especially women, we are constantly in this culture that wants us to continue to look the same. And that the 40s are interesting because if you're taking care of yourself, I mean, you look fantastic. So like, we still feel like our young selves. I don't feel like like an old woman in the fall of my existence. I feel young. I still feel like I look pretty youthful, but yet like I have to remember and constantly remind myself like, okay, yeah, let's not fight it. And one of the things I've been doing is really just sort of trying to focus on the gifts of this phase of life.
Yes.
And I'm sure you can relate, of just like being a bit more self-assured. I don't question myself quite so much. I have learned to listen to that inner voice. My intuition is a lot louder. And I listen to it. I flow more. And also I recognize that I'm more confident. So where does that come out for me? For me, it comes out really a lot in my sexuality, my interactions with other people. I'm not much of a people pleaser anymore. I mean, I still struggle with that, but I am much more clear and confident and kind of assertive. But with kindness,
Right?
Like, I just feel more sure of my footing and things. And that is so wonderful because even in my 30s, which when I think about like physically, and when I talk to women in their like I have a new friend who she just turned 30 and she was like freaking out about it. I was like, oh my God, girl. You are peaking, honey.
Yeah.
You are peaking. And like just physically, I feel like the 30s is such a great time, but it is, you're still pretty unsure.
Yeah.
Even when you feel more sure, but you're still kind of unsure. But you're not dealing with like what happens as you turn 40 and get into the mid 40s when you're like, ooh, I didn't feel that before. I used to feel that, you start feeling the aches and the pains and
Yep.
the weird things, or like, oh, I didn't notice that thing before. But
Right.
yeah, so it's so funny. And I'm sure in my 50s, I'm gonna look back at the me now and be like,
Right.
girl, what were you?
Right.
So I really try to remember, like, it's about the essence inside
Yeah.
I
I
feel, yeah.
totally. I what you said, I just agree with a lot. Like I think, I know I would go back 10 years ago and say something to that younger me and say you worried, or you
Ugh,
thought. So I have that perspective forward, and I think, okay, yeah, exactly. That 57-year-old, almost 58-year-old's going to come back and be like, girl, you were the hottest thing ever. Like, just
yeah.
own it. If I were you, I would like walk down the street and do what I would own everything about myself. So I got to keep that perspective in the present moment, because I know it's true that, I know my
Yes.
future self would look back and be like, girl, you had it. Like, you didn't even know it.
Yes, I know. It's so crazy. So that's why sometimes, yeah, I really try to just be in that.
Yes.
And then and if you experiment with that, even if you just like, even if you don't believe that,
Yeah.
on the days that you're just like, let's just try it.
Right.
Just pretend I
Just
think I know
pretend.
I've got
Yep.
it going on, and go out in the world, and you will see.
Yeah.
You will see the reaction, like
Yeah.
how it changes. Your inner
Yeah.
world really affects your outer world. And I'm single. I 45 and single and dating, and that is a journey. But like, when I go into a situation of just like, I know what I have to offer,
Mhm.
I convince myself I'm hot stuff, like,
Yeah.
in a moment, and it reflects. But yeah, and it can go the opposite way too.
Yep. Well, and that's what I like about learning about wellness type things, is because we can have these tools that shift us into this place of feeling more confident. You know what I mean? It's not all about the mind. A mind is important,
Yes.
but you get the body involved, you get those emotions involved, and then it kind of is like an engine that does it for you. I mean,
Yeah.
before you go on a date, you stand in a powerful pose, within a few minutes the chemicals start going through your brain that help you believe it. So it's not a willpower. That's what I think. Like, it's different than willpower. Like, let's use the tools to help us instead of but there's this idea that I've just got to think it, hard enough. And it's like, that's not false, but there's so much more truth that we can add to that. And I think that's maybe the empowering thing that you maybe offer your clients, is you give them a roadmap about, here's what to do, and that's something like a
Mhm.
type 3 Enneagram could not be a more perfect thing. And I'm a 2, with a 3. So I'm right next to the 3. So I mean, I've got that kind of too. It's like, I really like just a list of, here's what to do. And nutrition's so great because it is a cause and effect. You will notice a difference in nutrition. So tell us a little bit about what you love about nutrition, and about things that you've experienced with your clients in nutrition, and that kind of thing.
Well,
I'm anxious to hear.
I love that you brought that point up about, it's not, you hear about this mindset stuff, and it is really at the foundation.
Right.
But the wonderful thing, and I feel like people sometimes feel overwhelmed by it, but I actually think it's very good news,
Yes.
is that you can enable yourself to get into I mean, it's so incredible how hormones and neurotransmitters and blah blah blahs, they affect your attitude and your
Right.
emotions. We have more power than we think.
Mhm.
So with nutrition, I love nutrition. As I mentioned, I was diagnosed at a young age with an autoimmune disease, and I really started looking into the power of food and how you can, excuse me, and how you can heal the body, or really just kind of get out of the way of the body. So with that, I put my Hashimoto's into remission. I mean, I still am on thyroid medication because it had kind of progressed, but when I go do a test at a doctor's office, like, they don't see any antibodies anymore.
Wow.
And I 100% attribute that to diet and lifestyle. So I saw the power of nutrition in my life. I was a kid that always tended towards being overweight. It was just like my body type. I had two brothers who were like super athletic, and I was the artsy chubby one. And so I always was kind of hard on myself for that. And that was one of the reasons why I started to get into nutrition, was because I wanted to feel good and to look good. And it was kind of vanity that motivated some of my stuff. But I just happened to figure out,
Right.
this makes me feel a certain way. This makes me, and when you are in have a good relationship with your body and with food, there is a peacefulness. It's an act of self-love. And that's another thing I tell my clients, and it's been some of the most powerful stuff. I mean, people will come to me saying, I want this. A lot of times it's weight loss, or, to manage their breast cancer journey. And I've had some really incredible, just discussions with clients, because I let them know, hey, it's not usually about macronutrients and stuff like that. Yes, let's teach you how to find a balanced, carbs, fats, and protein, so that you know what it feels like to feel good. Excuse me. But after a while, like, the goal isn't for you to be tracking your food for the rest of your life. The goal is for you to develop a relationship with your body where you can listen to it and be loving to it. Like, I don't believe in suffering. I don't believe that that's a sustainable pathway to quote unquote optimal health. I think optimal health involves a really joyous path. And it's about, like, how do you nurture your relationship with yourself? How do you build the self-love, so that, nourishing yourself and feeding yourself is one of the ways that you express your self-love. Like, when I think about, like, what I want, or what my birthday dinner is going to be, it's, for me personally, it's not a plate of macaroni and cheese and like a bottle of wine. I no judgment to anybody who that works for, but that doesn't make me feel very good. I would love nothing more than, like, half dozen oysters on the half shell, really fresh, with, like, an incredible, like, fruit salad is something that's in season. And I do love very cold champagne if I'm going to eat oysters, something like that. So it's like, but that feels really good in my body. And so there are, like, how do you find this joyful expression of health? And it's been wonderful to work with people who are finding their way to that, which I think I became a meditation teacher after I got my nutrition certification, because I saw, like, we have to build this relationship, we have to build this awareness. And a lot of it is excuse me, so much of the struggle for people is just not being able to hear that voice, or not being able to slow down enough to say, what is it that I need? Because some days maybe the best meal for you is that plate of macaroni and cheese. But, like, I listen to the voice, and that's how you find balance, and that's how you find, like, an healthy, joyousness and health that includes moderation without it having to be this forced thing.
I had this client, so I lost a bunch of weight, and so I was in Women's Health magazine, and it was
cool.
It was interesting that I think I had 6 hours of interviews. They were trying to figure out what I did and what I ate and what I exercised, and that it was so much more than that for me. It was hard to describe. It was this, it was like this real full 4-body journey, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. I mean, it was a huge journey. And so I had people would reach out, and since then I'll coach people, and I even wrote a book. But there was this moment with this one woman I was talking to, and she says, I'll probably get a bag of chocolate chips, and I'll probably go through that bag in like a week,
Mm-hmm.
and I was nodding, it was like this shameful confessional, she's like, so what am I supposed to do with that?
Oh,
And I
yeah.
said, we're at step 1, you know what I mean? We're at step 1. I said, I will tell you, I want you to enjoy them.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, what? And I says, because I almost guarantee, like, because I was there too. It's more about the distraction
Mm-hmm.
in picking up. It's more about what's going on in my life. And I go reach for those handful of chocolate chips, and I'm frantically eating them.
Mm-hmm.
That moment, if you pause in that moment, that's the key to what's going on. And so if you go grab a handful of chocolate chips, and I tell you, if you sit down and you put 1 or 2, you're gonna, like, that's the relationship you should have with food. And it should, and then it should feel good inside. If you're eating something and then an hour later your stomach's bloated and you don't feel good, what's going on? That's something to get curious about. But tell me your what kind of relationship should we have with food? What kind of relationship, how do we gain that relationship with nutrition?
Well, I think you just kind of hit the nail on the head. And there was a book I was reading recently by Deepak Chopra. I think it's called like What's Eating You. And it talks exactly about that. I have 100% done that whole thing. And it's funny because when you said about the chocolate chips that she ate, I'm like, it took her a week.
I know, right? I know.
Like, that's pretty good.
I know. That's what I thought. I'm like, girl.
Yeah, you're doing all right. But no, right. but I think the like you said is like the curious part. And that's what I tell my clients, and that's what I tell myself, because I'm not perfect either.
Right.
And they're just working on that muscle of like, oh, okay, I noticed that every time I have to deal with the customer service rep at AT&T, I start to crave this or whatever, just like curious. And I don't even think the first step, if you're noticing that you're eating emotionally, I don't even think the first step is about stopping it. It's about observing in the moment. Okay, what is the trigger? What is the trigger? And then really kind of like taking that thread on the sweater and tracing it back to be like, oh, it's frustration. Or for me, a big one is boredom. Boredom is a big one for me, but also for me it's fear. That's a big one. And so when I've really taken the time I've worked on this a lot to just stop, because I notice for me, like, if I notice I'm eating like that, it is okay. I'm like, something else is going on.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can stop it and sometimes I can't. And if you can't stop it, you just have to be like, okay, all right, let's what's going on?
Yeah.
What's going on? And then I am like loving to myself. And if I do determine that it's fear, and I am, people might think I'm crazy for saying this, but it's another thing I think in my 40s that I've stopped caring about. Like, I live my lives. I will talk to myself.
Yes.
And a lot of times I do a lot of like, so it's usually a soothing mechanism.
Yes.
So I will either journal, or even sometimes if I just stop in that moment and I talk to myself and I talk myself through it and just like, you're okay.
Right.
What do I need to hear? What is that most vulnerable part of yourself need to hear in that moment? And, taking small steps, like in terms of repairing your relationship with food. I mean, if you have an eating disorder or something like that, obviously get help with somebody who's trained specifically in that. But
totally different.
if it's just like some emotional eating, which I feel like 99.9% of us have,
Yes.
it's about getting curious and being mindful. Again, that's
Mhm.
why I've gotten so deep into mindfulness. I'm like,
Mhm.
we don't know how to slow down. We don't
Mhm.
know how to investigate.
Mhm.
And as we connect the dots and listen to the voices and really go for, what do I really need in this
Mhm.
moment? What I really need in this moment is to not feel so scared.
Yeah.
Okay, is eating a bag of chocolate chips going to help that? No, it's
Mhm.
actually going to create like other emotions
Right.
and physical discomfort. So,
Mhm.
okay, let me talk to my friend, or let me
Mhm.
read this inspiring book. Let me
Mhm.
pet my dog for a couple minutes and just like chill out or feel my
Right.
feet on the ground. Like, what do I really need? And
Yeah.
making that choice, even if you can only make that choice 1 out of the 5 times it happens at first,
Right.
the more you do it, the
Mhm.
more you see the benefit, the
Mhm.
more you see, oh, that actually resolved
Mhm.
when I did it this way.
Yeah.
And that for me has been the most powerful thing. And, sometimes it's like, yeah, there have been times when it's like, oh my God, okay, I meditated for 20 minutes and then I took a
Right.
bath and then I did some restorative yoga. And it was like an all night effort.
Yeah.
But the next day I felt different. And if I had just gone the old route, was, drinking too much or
Right.
eating something that doesn't make me feel my best,
Mhm.
I don't feel good. Um,
Mhm.
and so I think as humans, we're always chasing the good. So
Yes.
we need to show ourselves what the good really is.
Mhm.
And even if it's just something little, like just trust yourself.
Mhm.
Try to take that moment to stop, like that pattern interrupt.
Yes.
And sometimes I literally just have to be like, stop. I
Right.
say it out loud, stop. And I just take a couple deep breaths. And
Mhm.
yeah, you're not always going to be successful.
Yeah, I know, and I appreciate that because it's true. It takes that self-compassion, and I even ask the question, "What am I hungry for?"
Hmm.
That's a good question. What am I really hungry for? I appreciate people like you that are willing to sit down with individuals
Hmm.
and help them find this balance,
Hmm.
their own balance, and I think that is really valuable. Really, really valuable because it's not something that comes maybe right at the beginning, it doesn't come within
Yeah.
our like always just comes natural. Like when I tune into that, there's it's this lack mentality. Maybe it's just
Hmm.
me, but sometimes it's like somehow there's this belief that this food somehow makes up or that if I say no, I can't have it, then I have this lack. It's like really emotional, like
I mean, it
so.
has there's so much energy behind it, and
Mhm.
it is incredible. I think that how much emotions are tied to food.
Yeah,
It's really interesting for me. I mean, this is a sweeping generalization, but
right.
my female clients compared to my male clients,
Wow.
like it's crazy how much more emotional food tends to be for most of my female clients.
Mhm.
And how it can be difficult. And a lot of times it breaks down to just really having to just simplify,
Mhm.
and making little healthy choices that are going to build on things. But I mean, there have been times in my life where I feel like I was in better shape and I wasn't very conscious of my food, but it was like there were other aspects of my life that were very aligned.
Mhm.
So it's that finding that sweet spot,
Yep.
but also just yeah, food has energy,
Mhm.
literally has energy. Food's going
Mhm.
to affect your energy, and it's all
Mhm.
such a delicate dance. But
Mhm.
the metric of weight is difficult, and I think we're a lot more educated now about how sort of obsolete it is, because
Mhm.
I've noticed the same thing. It's so funny. I think we all have that range of pants sizes that you keep in your closet that like and And I noticed there are times when I will technically weigh more, but I'm wearing the same clothes that I like wore when I was maybe even 10 pounds lighter. And
Yeah.
I'm very short. So like 10 pounds on me is more like 20 pounds on somebody a bit taller. But also there are times when, yeah, I weigh less and I feel like my clothes don't fit right. So
Right.
it's weight, especially with women who are still cycling, it's a water thing. I think you're very interesting idea about the emotional weight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I that doesn't surprise me.
Mhm.
But yeah, like how hydrated are you? How,
Mhm.
when was the last time you had a really good bowel movement? Like these
Right.
things really affect it. And
Right.
when we put so much weight on this number, that if
Mhm.
we were an alien coming down from another planet and we heard ourselves talk about this, we'd be like, what?
Yeah.
What do you like? That's it. We've given
Right.
so much
Power.
value,
Yeah.
and then
Yes.
and these things of the whole like BMI scale. I mean,
Yeah.
granted, yeah, it's a range, and
Right.
yes, sure, I do believe within that
The
range there
tool.
probably is
Yeah.
a space that you would
Yes.
mostly be good in, and they're big ranges.
Right.
But at the same time, like we have to look at other elements of things,
Mhm.
and yeah, and just recognize like there's so much more. And it's so hard too how, even though we're women, two women who are kind of in a different phase of life where we've let go of probably the concerns that we would have as a 20-year-old,
Right.
um we still I am still very much like affected
Yep.
by by the weight ranges and the number on the scale. And I go through
Yes.
most phases I don't have a scale, but I
Mhm.
currently do.
Mhm.
And when you weigh yourself, you see how crazy the fluctuations can
Yes.
be. And yeah, there's apps that like do at weight averages. I think those are great tools for people so you don't get
Mhm.
stuck on things. But it's
Mhm.
all about like how you use the data,
Right.
you know?
Right. And that's the thing is it's not about the number on the scale. It's how your thoughts, beliefs, feelings
Yeah.
about that number.
Yeah.
That's really as much of the work, you know, as far as the weight issue goes. And that's the thing that's I think is a little too bad because we correlate nutrition with weight so much. And it's true, but like that's the motivator where it's like,
Mhm.
well, but feeding this physical body that communicates and experiences, whether, all the sensations or the things coming in through the senses, that is how we are experiencing the world. And that's your greatest tool, and food is the fuel. I love that you talked about if aliens came down because I use that example all the time. I'm like, do you realize if aliens came down, they just wanted to study us, they'd say like, so I don't get it.
Mhm.
How come this body is more acceptable than this body? Like,
Yeah.
help me understand. I don't get it at all. That is just a construct we have created. And I don't, I only have to convince one person. I say, I only have to convince one person that I am the greatest thing walking around on the earth. That's me.
Yeah.
Like that's it. I don't have to get anyone else to come along with me if I am fully there for myself. And so
Mhm.
to unprogram, that's what I kind of work on
Mhm.
to reprogram some of those thoughts and beliefs and that we have about ourselves that, doesn't even matter what the number is. It's just ourselves. We have these preconceived ideas that have come from all these little moments in our lives. And so I say, as far as weight loss concerned, what if we looked at it more about healing than willpower? What if it was about
Mhm.
healing? I just think, what would that be like if we thought about it as this healing journey?
Well, I
Yeah.
also think it's about if you really go to the root of things, like health, I mean, For some of us,
Mhm.
you know, the motivation often starts with like, well, I really want to look good in
Mhm.
this. But what's the motivation behind that is you want to feel confident. You
Right.
want to feel like good in your own skin.
Yeah.
So that's what I kind of try to teach my clients too, is like, you know, okay, yes, we can look at the number on the scale if that's a goal for you, but do you move with ease?
Yes.
Can you move like how do your joints feel? How do you feel in your body? How do you
Yes.
feel when you put on this dress? Yeah, it
Mhm.
might require that you lose a little bit of weight to feel confident in these
Mhm.
clothes, but like if you chase the feeling
Yes.
as opposed to a number, it does fall in line.
Mhm.
And if you nurture your release, like for example, yeah, like if you want to feel good in your skin and confident, like okay, that's a multifaceted journey, you know,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
if you tell yourself constantly like how stupid and ugly you are, like even
Mhm.
if you hit your goal weight and you're still telling yourself that, you're not going to be
Right.
happy. And I
Mhm.
think we've all experienced that, or I know many of us have
Yep.
probably experienced it, myself included, where like I did reach a goal weight and then it was like, well, but I'm just not quite skinny enough. And it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, that was about me. And when
Mhm.
I look back on it now, I was like, oh my God, it was like, I looked amazing. I felt
Yes.
good. Like I was in such a wonderful place, but it's like the moving goalpost.
Yes.
So now my journey is so much more about what do I want to do? I want to be able to go on a hike and like feel good. I
Mhm.
don't want my joints to ache. I want, you know, now a lot of it is about like just being not feeling inflamed,
Mhm.
feeling confident in my clothes, um and you know, being able to show up to a date and not be like, oh God, my this you know, like so
Suck it in, suck it in.
yeah, I mean, there's and you know, and there's still a pooch there, but it's not like
Right.
it doesn't affect me when I'm feeling good in my body because I know
Right.
that I'm fueling properly. I
Right.
know I have clarity of mind. I know I'm grounded because those are things that food can give you.
Yes.
You know, when you're fueling your body with yeah, you feel it and it all feeds on itself, but it can be very complicated.
Mhm.
We make it extremely complicated.
Yes.
And I think it's really just like it always comes back to just slow down a little bit,
Mhm.
be compassionate towards yourself, and it doesn't have to happen overnight. Like it's this
Right.
relationship that we're nurturing with our health it's a journey, and
Yes.
unfortunately it never ends. It just,
Yeah.
you know, until we end.
Right.
Because that's the other thing, my dad, when I started getting really into, you know, working with nutrition, my dad wanted to kind of get involved, and we bounced a lot of things off of each other. And he would be like, he would find out something that he felt like worked. And then he would get really upset when it stopped working. And it's like, well, you have to adjust.
Right.
Our bodies have their own seasons
Right.
too. And just like, you know, we're in fall now. I
Mhm.
live in Portland and it's about to get cooler finally, like at the end of this week. And I'm just shifting that mode, like,
Yes.
you know, eating more soups and stews and all these things, which I'm so excited about. But
Yes.
also like, yeah, it's a different way of eating than in the summer.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, and I'm my exercise is going to be different, and
Yep.
my sleep is going to be different. I always need way more sleep in the winter at colder months.
Mhm.
And I always question it, and then I get all worried, is something wrong with me? But it's like, no, this happens every year.
Yes.
Just it's okay. It happens every year. You forget.
Yes.
So,
Yes. That
yeah.
is the nice thing about the 40s is you start to just accept things as they are instead of fighting again. You know, you finished fighting and you're getting to the reality of whether this is authentic to me. Because that's the thing.
Yeah.
Is this authentic to me, or is this something I really do need to face and become focused on? And it's different. I don't know. It's different for everybody. It's different for everybody.
Yes.
Well, Yeah, I've loved everything we talk about. I think we could go on for ages, but with the Wholeness Network, we, the word wholeness is always such a unique word for individuals. So we always like to ask our clients or our guests, what does wholeness? Tell me about wholeness. What does it mean to you? What comes up for you? What is wholeness to you?
That's such a lovely question. And I feel like I'm kind of inspired by what you just said about just being authentic.
Mhm.
Acknowledging the light and the dark. I
Mhm.
think being in full surrender to what is.
Yeah.
That to me is wholeness, because there's always going to be something more to strive for. There's always going to be some, corner that you can judge. But when I am in the moment, as fleeting as it may be, that's when I feel whole, when I am fully accepting of all things. That's, to me, that's where I feel wholeness, that's where I feel peace. And then the more I can kind of try to come back to that over and over again, the more I see my health benefit, my career benefit. Like, authenticity is like a magnet for
Mm.
people, and it's healing when you are
Yeah.
living your authentic existence. Whether you don't have to be a guru or giving advice. You're an example.
Mhm.
And I think that is, yeah, just being, surrendering and flowing with everything that is, and accepting.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. Feel empowered every day with wholeness videos, meditations, downloads, classes, and more by joining the Wholeness Library at thewholenessnetwork.com.